ending the deeply entrenched social injustices and discriminations prevalent in Indian society. In several of his writings, he advanced a transformative constitutionalism that aimed to address the historical injustices and systemic discrimination faced by the marginalized and oppressed communities in India. His vision was rooted in the principles of equality, social justice, and the protection of fundamental rights. In his classic yet undelivered address, which he later published as The Annihilation of Caste in 1936, Dr. Ambedkar stated, "If you ask me," he said, "my ideal would be a society based on liberty, equality, and fraternity." Later, Dr. Ambedkar brought these values in the language of the Constitution itself, from the preamble across the entire canvas of the Indian Constitution. Dr. Ambedkar tried to institutionalize social revolution through law. He believed that a just and inclusive society could be achieved through a robust legal framework that would safeguard the rights and dignity of all citizens, particularly those from historically disadvantaged backgrounds. That is the reason why he held a different approach with the other leaders of Indian independence, who focused on political freedom without addressing social freedoms. For Dr. Ambedkar, political freedom was neither an end in itself nor complete or sufficient in itself. And to him, freedom would lack the core of its soul unless freedom came with social freedom. And he wrote, "Political reform cannot with impunity take precedence over social reform in the sense of the reconstruction of society. The makers of political constitutions must take into account social forces as well." Thus, in Dr. Ambedkar's conceptualization, the idea of a constitution goes beyond its traditional role as a mere set of rules and principles for governance. It extended the Constitution's capacity to liberate and empower marginalized and oppressed groups. The emancipatory idea of the Constitution, which Dr. Ambedkar advanced, sought to address historical injustices, challenge systems of discrimination, and advance the cause of emancipation and equality. Furthermore, Dr. Ambedkar's constitutionalism aimed at creating a robust framework of checks and balances, where the Constitution would serve as a bulwark against potential abuses of state power, ensuring the protection of the rights of all citizens. One of the key aspects of Dr. Ambedkar's constitutionalism was the inclusion of affirmative action measures, known as reservations in India, to uplift historically disadvantaged groups. For several decades, he advocated for incorporation of mandatory affirmative action provisions into the Constitution. Dr. Ambedkar believed that such measures would help rectify historical injustices by providing opportunities and representation to the marginalized. He called mandatory affirmative action a form of separation of power. Today, the non-discrimination and affirmative action are often differentiated by references to a negative and positive form of liberty. Arguments that the state ought to abstain from discriminating are distinguished from a positive command or mandate to uplift individuals who have suffered from historical wrongs. It is also argued that affirmative action is fundamentally contrary to the idea of equality, or colorblind equality at the least. You find traces of that rationale not only in India but in the US as well, including in recent times.